Welcome to our Unitarian Sunday Thoughts from Cork Unitarian Church. Today we will explore forgiveness, atonement, repentance, and reparations. These topics have a special significance at this time of year due to the Jewish and Christian holidays that focus on these very same themes. In the Jewish tradition, this time of year is the time for the Jewish New Year called Rosh Hashanah. It means head of the year. It is a 10-day festival that culminates with the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Now, the Hebrew word for repentance translates to return, as in return to God. In the Jewish Bible, there are multiple verses asserting that sincere repentance will always be acceptable to God at any time, because repentance restores a person to God's desired state of goodness. In Jewish tradition, restitution, or making amends to wrongs done to others, is a crucial part of repentance. Restitution is considered essential for certain types of sins, particularly those against fellow humans. Now, restitution is not payment for sins. That would be punishment. Rather, restitution is payback for the damage caused by sins. Or another way of saying that is restitution is making good for the loss caused by one's misdeeds, particularly if that misdeed is done intentionally. Restitution is a bit like step 9 in a 12-step program. You know, the step that calls for people to make amends. Another Jewish concept is atonement. This is different from restitution. Atonement is more like a fine or a punishment imposed by a court. It is a penalty cost associated with having done an offense. Atonement may be instead of or in addition to restitution, particularly for offenses that cannot be undone. For example, if someone breaks your window, they can replace it. That would be restitution. If they kill you, not so much. They can't bring you back to life, so restitution is not possible. Another interesting thing about atonement is that it can be transferred. In Jewish tradition, there's a story where Abraham was commanded by God to kill his son. But at the last moment, God allowed Abraham to sacrificially kill a ram instead. This ability to transfer is sometimes referred to as substitutional atonement. Now, at the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the high priest would offer a scapegoat as an atonement sacrifice on Yom Kippur. This sacrifice was in part a way of compensating for any societal sins of the community or the government of the Jewish state. Christian notions of atonement associated with Jesus and the Easter season are largely derived from those Jewish models. Jesus and his early Jewish followers would have been well aware of all these Jewish customs and concepts. Over time, Christians came to have different interpretations of these concepts from other Christians. And I think, in fact, even in the Jewish community, there'd be a variety of interpretations as well. But in the Christian world, they looked at these differently from among different groups of Christians, both as they related to sins against God and also as they related to transgressions against each other. In the New Testament, most of the gospel and epistle authors stressed atonement. They wanted to emphasize the theological notion that Jesus' death was being a case of substitutional sacrifice for all human sins. The exception to this is Luke's gospel. Luke was theologically more focused on Jesus' resurrection than he was on rationalizing Jesus' death. As a result, Luke's portrayal of Jesus stresses repentance and forgiveness rather than atonement. Even where Luke is working off of the earlier material written by Mark, Luke makes a point to remove phrasing that Mark had suggesting atonement. And interestingly enough, later copyists and redactors modified Luke's gospel to better match the atonement theology of the other New Testament writers. These differing Christian interpretations of theology for forgiveness, atonement, and restitution have continued up into the Reformation and then on into modern times. Now, these differences are important because in many cases, people's model of how they think about forgiveness with regard to each other is tied to how they think God deals with people. So I'll ask, what does forgiveness mean to you? Does it mean, do you think, that you forgive and forget? Does it mean that you should not, or maybe must, be entitled to compensation? Should there be punishment in addition to compensation? I can't tell you what theologically you should believe. And maybe it's all fine that there's such differing theological ideas. What I can offer is my own observations based on my own work as a healthcare chaplain. Firstly, I'll say that just as repentance is a return to our desired state, forgiveness is a freeing from the emotional impact of an offense against us. Secondly, I'll say that forgive and forget, with the emphasis here being on the forget part, only really applies to minor unintentional transgressions, things that are inherently not worth our time and effort. Thirdly, I'll say that forgiveness does not necessarily place us back to where we were before. The transgression may have brought to light some character flaw, immaturity, or personal issue that may take time and effort for the offender to correct. Blindly ignoring those deficiencies in the name of forgiveness is the mark of codependent enablement and is really irresponsible. Finally, above all, forgiving means that we cease to bear a grudge or seek vengeance. We may still be hurting from the offense, but we don't add to that hurt by building up a desire to reciprocate the hurt. We need to realize that forgiveness is a transformational process that takes us time and effort as well. We may still allow the offender to bear the consequences of their action, but not out of spite. We do it because those consequences provide a behavioral incentive for the offender to adapt their future behavior, protecting ourselves, perhaps others, and even protecting the offender, him or herself. And now for a blessing. May the injuries caused to us by others or by our own action not deter us from seeking to be better humans. May we learn to walk forward with compassion, confidence, and understanding. May we find the strength, wisdom, and courage to forgive ourselves and others. And may we always know that growth and healing are always possible as long as we have breath. And I wish you all peace and blessings.